Hello and welcome back to another episode of WTF is AuDHD with late diagnosed sisters Ellie and Paige. We were diagnosed late.
And we're here to educate.
Lovely. And we won't hold you up too much in this intro because we have a very special guest joining us today and next week as well, because we have had an amazing 2-hour chat, haven't we?
Yeah. Was great. I loved it. Every minute.
Yeah, every minute of it. We want to include all of it, but we thought with ADHDers listening, we probably shouldn't put a 2-hour episode up.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot. So we've split it into two. And today's episode is with Dr Khurram Sadiq, and he is a neurodevelopmental psychiatrist. He is also AuDHD himself. He specialises in AuDHD. He's done 6 TEDx talks. He is very well known around the world for specialising in AuDHD, which, as you know, as you're listening, that's one of the things, that's the thing that people don't know much about. We know a little bit about autism, we know a little bit about ADHD, but we don't know a lot about the combo. And so Dr. Khurram Sadiq is literally one of the best we could have got. And I'm really, really proud and excited.
Moonshot goal.
Yeah, moonshot.
We were like, screw it. You don't ask, you don't get. So we'll try. And then
here he bloody is.
What a legend.
What a legend. So we're really excited for this. We've put in the description sort of rough time codes for each subject. So if you do just want to go for specific things, you can do that. But I would still recommend listening to the whole thing because it's really interesting.
So good.
Even him talking about his own journey and like where he came from and what battles he faced. It's very relatable because he was undiagnosed ADHD himself for a very, very long time. And also we have something very exciting as well, don't we?
Over to Studio 2.
Hello there, Paige.
Paige has been given a segment to speak. Let's see how well I do. But we've got a giveaway of Dr. Khurram Sadiq's book, Explaining AuDHD, signed copy. So that's live on our Instagram now, that competition. Tag a friend and let them know about our potty and you're in the draw to potentially win that.
Yeah, a signed copy. And now I've read the book and it's wonderful. Like it's really, really good. And it's got a lot of stuff in it about like how to differentiate between autistic and ADHD traits that look similar. And we do talk about this in this episode. So I'll just give you a rough overview of what this episode covers. Dr. Khurram talks about his upbringing and his own AuDHD experience, how he ended up working in mental health, how he was diagnosed. We talk about the woman's experience of AuDHD and autism and ADHD. Khurram defines autism and ADHD, which is really interesting. We talk about cultural and gender-based biases in diagnosis. He gives a hypothesis about like what causes neurodivergence and like genetics and the link there. We talk a bit about hormones, and we also talk about whether ADHD and autism actually sit on a shared spectrum or not. And then we do a little deep dive into, like I just mentioned, differentiating between traits that look similar on the outside but are actually very different on the inside. So we also talk about the levels 1, 2, and 3 and then profound autism as well. So this one's a lot about what AuDHD is, how it manifests, how it's caused. And then next week we've got other stuff that we chat to him about. So we'll just let you in here. Let's bloody go. This is Dr. Khurram Sadiq. Thank you so much for your time. It's so good to have you here. I honestly feel like I'm interviewing my idol when it comes to AuDHD.
That's so nice. That's so very kind of you. But I'm really delighted. I'm really honored to be here. You're doing some amazing work because there isn't much out there about AuDHD. It's growing up, but again, so like you're doing a massive favor to this neurodivergent community, especially with AuDHD.
Oh, thank you. And so as are you, because honestly, when we were diagnosed, there was just so little info about the combination, and you're one of the people that I found TED Talks on, and I was like, oh my gosh, yay. And when you use the words order versus anarchy, I was like, oh my gosh, he's got it. That's exactly it. Yeah. The whole difference between them. Well, for our audience, I know a few people have already read your book, seen your TED Talks and stuff, but do you just want to tell us a little bit about you? And I know that people hate that open-ended question. So even if you just tell us about your special interests or whatever you feel like sharing, so people can kind of get to know you personally first.
Yeah, so I originally come from Pakistan. So I was born and bred in Pakistan. I come from a very small town in Pakistan, which is known as Dera Ismail Khan. Like it's very difficult to pronounce even for the natives. So so my initial exposure, my initial days, I remember like used to be lost in this identity crisis where I was chaotic and I was called lazy, and because there are so many societal pressures and cultural pressures. I come from a family who were really, really academics, and there were doctors, engineers, like MBAs, MPAs, like you name it, and they were there. Like literally in our family, even the women in 80s, they had masters as a baseline degree. So when comparing myself with those, because I used to lose my notebooks, my dear mother had to be awake till 2 o'clock in the morning, and that used to happen every 6 weeks or so. I would lose everything, or I would be so inattentive, I would forget to write the homework down, or not able to bring the homework down, and then the teachers used to be tyrannic, like they used to beat the hell out of you if you did not come with the homework. So we're talking about the 1980s, which was kind of a norm everywhere in Pakistan. So I grew up with that kind of identity, but that, at the same time, like there were certain things I was very pedantic about and very particular about. For example, I used to be in small model cars. We used to call it dinkies, and they were like small fast cars. So at a very young age, 5 to 6 years of age, I used to have a collection of 300 to 400 of them. And I used to organize it in a certain manner. And I had a toy car that I used to pedal, but everything was laid out on it. And I remember those, like each one of them, very, 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 very clearly. And that gave my mother an opportunity, and she started teaching me using those cars. For example, if it was mathematical tables, she used to call the car pups. So two into one is equal to 2 pup, and then 2 into 2 is equal to 4 pup. So that's how I remember things. I remember tables, and she took all the effort. I remember the table, like when I was 5 or 6 years old. I remembered up to 10 tables, so which was quite unique for for a child of my age. At the same time, like I was inattentive. So those were the kind of discrepancies. And in one class, I would remember that I'd be very brilliant one year, and next year I would almost be at the brink of failing. And I did not understand why. My parents did not understand why. My teachers did not understand why. So how can there be so much discrepancy in that? And then when we moved cities, and then we came to a very scenic place called Swat, which is at that time called the Switzerland of the Asia. Like it was so beautiful, raw beauty. And what I started to do was I started doing road work. So I tried to memorize everything, so that I had to, and it used to be tough, like memorization with ADHD. Like it was very, very tough. So those were the early years that I had with all those struggles and people kind of bringing you down and calling you different kind of names and comparing you with others. The comparisons were big time with my elder cousins, and they are doing this and you have not done this, and the pressure of those comparisons was enormous. And I felt kind of, I was bullied as well. But the good thing about ADHD is you forget about things. So the trauma that was supposed to be there, it does not, is no more there. But what happens is when you start taking the ADHD medication, those memories come back, and they come back very strongly. So all of a sudden people will realize 10 years ago, 15 years ago, those things happened to me. And then they will go back into that trauma because they could not register and they could not recall that information. So those were my early days. And again, from a very early age, it was kind of hammered into my head that I had to be a doctor, because a lot of my elder cousins and uncles and grandparents, they were doctors. And my mother used to say, you have to be a neurosurgeon, and you have to be a neurosurgeon. And I knew from a very young age, like when I was doing pre-medicine, I was a wicket keeper playing cricket. And I dropped 10 dollies, like literally with my gloves on. And I knew something was wrong somewhere. Like, how can I miss those? Like it's how do I place my fingers? So I keep it wide, or keep it close together, or keep my hands to the body. I could not understand that. So thank God for that. I didn't become a neurosurgeon. I would have caused more harm than I would cause anybody any benefits. I know. And so somehow, like again, the most productive years were the pre-medical years, which was kind of equivalent to A levels, where somehow, some ways, because I was incentivized and was driven that I have to be in medical school because there were two medical schools in the whole region. That was for about around 25 million people. And the competition was cutthroat. And I said, I have to get in. And so that's where my flexibility comes in. So my brain became awake. I was allowed to kind of stay till mornings. And that's why my brain started absorbing, because usually for an ADHD, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock is when all of a sudden the brain comes alive and all the ideas and all the things and it comes to a surface. So my parents allowed me to kind of work through the night and early mornings, and hence I did really, really well competing against 15,000, 20,000 people. And there were 220 seats. So finally I got into the medicine, medicine. So those were my early days. But then when I became a doctor, when I went into medicine, the very first week, I was like, what the hell have I done? Like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, why am I even here? Like, again, nothing makes sense because all of a sudden it's independent learning. There are no structures. Like people are starting different subjects. Like, for example, if it was physiology, rather than starting from cell and nerves and how does the impulse travel, they started from cardiology. I was like, it does not make sense. When you have not taught us the basics, how do you expect us to? And all the people ran with it and they were absolutely happy with it. But I was like, it does not make sense. So my autistic brain did not want to accept that this could happen. Like it's all so jumbled.
Yeah.
And people then just now the friends of mine who had been with, and they said, you have done medicine privately, because I used to disappear. I used to do my own thing. I would not attend the classes because it would not make sense to me. Even in the wards, I had good mannerism when it comes to the personal history. But when it came to the skill set, because I was dyspraxic as well, I used to hide away. There was a lot of aversion that went on. And at one stage, I said, I don't want to do medicine. In my third year, I went to my father. I said, I don't want to do it. And he said, which he rightly did at that time. He said, just finish what you started. And if you still want to do something else, do something else. And I did my bachelor's while I was doing my medicine. And I wanted to compete in civil services. I want to be a policeman, a police officer, because the sense of social justice was really, really strong. I was like, I would do this and I would do that. But that did not succeed because in the first year after doing my exams, I used to gravitate towards the subjects that I like. So you had to pick up 6, 7, 8 subjects in order to make up for the marks. And I would just focus on the very favorite subject. And in that favorite subject, I would kind of gravitate towards my favorite topic. For example, I picked geography out of nowhere and I was interested. And in geography, I became interested in tectonic plates to the extent that at one point, I started talking to people in St. Andreas in California because I wanted to do a master's in tectonic plates. My father said, what? You're doing a competitive exam and all of a sudden you're saying I want to do a master's in sociology and a master's in tectonic plates. So, at that time, the MSN Messenger used to be very popular. So I used to chat with a lot of people about what's happening in California, what are the kind of tectonic plates? Is it divergent tectonic plates that it would split up and then it would cause a tsunami and all those things that you would see. There's a Dwayne Johnson movie, I think, St. Andreas Fault, St. Andreas something by that name. So when I saw that movie, I said, yes, that's exactly what I was talking about 20 years ago.
It's very interesting stuff. That topic I find interesting as well.
Oh yes. And then I finally decided that okay, I've done medicine. So everybody was going to England. I said, okay, let's jump onto the bandwagon. Let's see what everybody else is doing. And I did not have anything in my mind about psychiatry. It used to intrigue me, but I was more interested in sociology. So somebody said, why don't you try mental health? and I got an attachment in a psychiatric ward, and for a few weeks. And it was the first day. I went in at 9 o'clock and I came out at 5 o'clock. I was invested. I said, this is what I want to do.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, exactly. And then there was no looking back from there.
Oh,
And that
that's
was way back in
amazing.
2004.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I think everyone listening will relate to your journey
Yeah.
of just like feeling like you don't understand anything when you're younger, feeling like you can't fit anywhere, feeling like you don't know what you want to do, the pressures of society. Your story is so relatable to so many people that will be listening. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And it's awesome that you found your special interest, hopefully now,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Well, you've written a book, so I'm pretty sure you found it.
This is what I was saying. This is what I was saying, I think, in our episode, last week, about how it took me about till this age to finally feel like I've found what I'm doing from like the age of 18 leaving school. And there was a few comments like, I feel lost, like nothing's sticking. And I'm like, trust me, even though it doesn't feel like something's sticking, it means when you're going somewhere and it doesn't work out, that means you, first of all, know you didn't want to do that. But second of all, it opens up other doors that you never thought would have been opened if you hadn't have gone there. So I think it's just reminding yourself that it all makes sense in the end. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. And I followed the advice of a very famous neurodivergent person, Steve Jobs. And he said, if you're not interested in something, if you're doing something and you're not interested in it, just keep on changing things, keep on exploring till you find something that you're really, really passionate about. And I said that was one of the best things that he said about life. And again, I followed it blindly. And now I realize that, he was a neurodivergent.
And that's what I did too.
Yeah.
And then I finally found what I wanted to do. So.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's awesome. Well, how did you come about? Because you were diagnosed AuDHD, so autistic, ADHD. I heard you mention you were dyspraxic as well. How did you come to be diagnosed? What was that journey and process like for you? Well, how did you get there?
Okay, so I was enjoying mental health, and then one day, I think it was my first year, second year, one of my consultant psychiatrist, he said, "Oh, you have to see somebody who's got a diagnosis of Asperger's." And I had not heard of Asperger's. I said, Asperger's? I said, yeah, it's a form of autism. And what I remember from what I'd learned was, so I said, so is he disabled? And he just looked at me and said, you need to go and read. I said, okay, I'll read. And then I started reading about autism, and I got really, really fascinated because he was an astrophysicist. And it was half an hour's appointment, and it turned out to be an hour and a half because it was so fascinating. We talked and we kind of connected on so many different levels. And since then, I was fascinated. So that was my first kind of taste of neurodivergence or neurodevelopmental conditions. And then I was moving from place to place because, again, ADHD does not allow you to kind of stick to one place for more than, like, my maximum stay at a single job has been not more than 2.5 years. So every time I moved, so I've moved around quite a lot in the UK. So I moved from one place to another till I found my mentor who kind of define my journey for me, because sometimes you need somebody to tell you as to what you're doing and to treat you in a way that helps you to understand yourself and where you're going and allowing you the flexibility. And that's where I understood that he was so flexible and allowed me to do so many things, whereas a lot of other supervisors were telling, this is the clinical stuff, this is what you have to do, this is your priority. But he said, you can do anything. You can do management, you can do leadership, you can write the articles, you can do your own research, do whatever you want to. I just want that for days that we are around, at least one of us should be present in this building. So absolutely fine. And that's when I passed the exams, and he bumped me up when a position came to an ad hoc consultant psychiatrist, and where they were starting, and that was way back in 2010, an adult ADHD and adult autism service back in Manchester, UK. And the lead came to me and said, we are starting that service. You seem enthusiastic. Would you like to have a go? And I said, yeah. Like, again, for an ADHD, you need the novelty of it. It's something new, it's something exciting. I have had a flavor of autism. I did not realize till then that I've got autism and I've got ADHD. Because coming back from especially a different kind of cultures, we are so protected, there's so intertwining, social intertwining, that we don't realize that we have issues till come certain age. Like academic wise, I had issues, but socially, I did not because I was so protected in that environment by my parents and my family members and the friends around that place. So then when I started doing that job, I did it for a year and it was a mind-blowing experience for me. So I felt connected to people. Like I used to be fascinated when they used to come in and talk about things in such details. And then I realized that, yeah, I used to do that. I used to make a lot of lists. Like in year 8, I remember I started, I bought a notebook and I said, okay, so I will now start writing about every single movie that I've seen till date. And I started writing it. And for sometimes for the sake of it, I would go and watch some movies and then I'll have to and the process of creating those lists was so fascinating. Like it was so kind of exciting. It was interest provoking. Like you would gravitate towards that. And then I remember I was into cricket from a very young age, but cricket not like I used to play, but more than that, I was into statistics. So I used to read a magazine called Cricketer. It was a monthly magazine. And my father said, if you do well in exams, you will get a subscription of it on a monthly basis. And that used to be the time, like the first or second, I would wait eagerly for that magazine. I would follow every test match, every one-day series. And what I started doing was in my notebook, I started writing the stats of all the players, not just Pakistani players, all around the world. Every series that was played around 1987 till I think 1994. Before it was published in the magazine, I would have the stats. I would have the updated stats. Like they have played so many matches, not out in those many innings. They have scored this many runs, 50s, 100s, 4s, 6s, and average. And like I was fascinated by Don Bradman. And again, if you still ask me the average, and I can exactly tell you, like he had played 52 matches, 80 innings. He was not out 10 times. He made 6,996 runs. He had 2,900s, 13 50s. Out of those 29, 12 were double centuries. He scored 300, and he was not out on 299 months. In his last match, when he was having an average of 100 plus, he got out on a knot, and hence his average went down to 99.94.
Wow, that is specific. So is this where you started figuring out, maybe I'm autistic?
Exactly. When I started running that service, I'm autistic. There's so many different things about me, the lists, and if I gravitate towards a certain subject, it doesn't necessarily have to be academic. It can be literally anything. Like I went into gemstones, and I then used to collect. And I don't remember that I used to collect things like stamp collection, postcard collection, keychain collection, matchbox collection. Then I went into gemstones when I was 12 or 13, where I was living. There used to be a very exactly big thing about gemstones. So I started collecting gemstones. I started collecting money, and then I would go into those shops, the antique shops, and I would buy gemstones and I would label them. I'll put them in a small box, and then there was a bigger box and it was all placed, and I would happily show it to anybody who would come in. So
cool.
I realized that yeah, there is definitely something which I can associate with. Yeah. And that's where I was like, I have to develop that skill set. And I've been developing that skill set since 2010. But then properly when I came to neurodevelopmental, when I started working, and when you say working, it's like you have the skill set, you see patients who are not coming to you for autism assessments, but you accidentally find it. That's one of the fascinating things for me, because it was a novelty of exploring and being curious and finding something out about those people. And then in 2019, I properly started doing autism and ADHD work, started with children, and then because I specialize in adults, so I now see people across the lifespan. So I I can map out the journeys of people, both male and female, across the lifespan, and how the autism would like, how the ADHD would like. Because a lot of the time, either you're a child specialist or an adult specialist. So I specialize in both, and hence developing that expertise. And then around 2021, when I was working in one of the private organization, and the CEO came to me, they were very happy. Patients used to be very happy because, again, for me, it was a conversation, it was an exploration. So many people would used to say, yeah, it seems that you're sitting in our head. Like literally, you are spelling out things that happened to me, but you are actually telling us beforehand, before we could tell you. And he came to me and said, why don't you start doing joint assessments, autism and ADHD? And as my ADHD clicked in, I said, yeah, why not? So I agreed straight away. And when I went home, I said, oh my God, what have I done? Like, again, it's yes, it's different doing autism and ADHD assessment, but bringing it all together, again, you have to navigate through the journeys and how you're going to do that. So that's when I started doing the joint assessments, and I've become an expert. I've created my own algorithms of doing a joint assessment. I don't go with a checklist or a questionnaire. I just go through their journey, navigating through things, and while they're telling me, I extract information as they go along. So it does not feel like it's a checklist or it's a tick box exercise for me.
That's great.
So,
it is so different for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, and the way it manifests.
Yeah.
Totally.
I've always wondered, should we be diagnosing them or testing for both together? Because I also agree that the checklist thing, often with the autistic thinking, you can be quite rigid. And so you might look at a question and not even relate to it, but you actually very much do, just in a different way you haven't looked at. So if in an ideal world, would you say that you would prefer to have everyone assessed at the same time, even if they don't suspect one or the other? What do you think of that?
I think that there should be a neurodiversity directorate. It should not be just autism or ADHD specialists or dyspraxia or dyslexia specialists. There should be a for example, somebody who has been referred for ADHD, going to that directorate, he should be tested for everything. So it means that that the person or the team should have expertise in autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette syndrome, and everything around it. It should be a very holistic assessment so that they don't have to, for example, in the UK, it happens, for example, somebody comes to me with ADHD and then I find that, there's an underlying autism. So they have to go to the autism team, and then they are on the back of the queue, and the queue might be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years long, and they have to wait for that long. And then they have to borrow some money or get some money or save some money in order to do private assessment. So that is not fair. So if it is one directorate, no matter whether you have been referred for dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, autism, ADHD, you are being assessed for all those conditions. So it's a holistic assessment, takes slightly more time than doing a single assessment, but at the end of the day, it would be beneficial for the patient, it would be beneficial for the clinicians as well.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think also when you go in with just getting diagnosed for one, often even the clinician probably is only looking for that one and then might accidentally ignore other signs for other things. So no, I love that you're taking that approach, and I really hope that in future we have more people who are just getting assessed generally for neurodivergence, because it just makes more sense, doesn't it? Because I went twice. I had to get diagnosed with ADHD, and then 2.5 years later, I realized, I think I'm autistic, and then I had to have another assessment. So I wish I'd just got picked up. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, because isn't it quite uncommon actually that someone has just got one? So a lot of the time there are a couple to a few that are comorbid. So like me, AuDHD, and multifocal tic syndrome. I don't have verbal tics, but I have a lot of body tics. And those were all kind of diagnosed at different times. So, no.
Absolutely. And I train a lot of people. So I make sure that when I'm teaching them about ADHD, because I run an ADHD service for the National Health Service in Southeast London. So I make sure that whosoever I have trained in one, I train them in the other as well. So all my prodigies, those people that I've worked with, my trainees who have become my colleagues, and then my friends, they know both autism and ADHD. So I don't believe in just teaching one. And I think they should be more about dyslexia, dyspraxia that should come in. A lot of it is covered within the ADHD. It improves, but at the same time, I also feel that there should be strategies in place to help that. The clumsiness and the amount of social awkwardness that creates, I think it's unbelievable.
Yeah, amen. I agree. Well, would you mind, based on your lived experience, but then also your research, how would you describe the experience of autism and ADHD? How would you describe it, just from a personal / research perspective?
So it's like having two different brains and having two different bodies, and I always kind of refer it to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Hulk and Bruce Banner. Like again, there's one side of it which is very calm, which is very methodical, which needs order, which needs preparation. There's another side of you that is very impulsive, that is novelty seeking, that jumps into every other situation, that is very impulsive, and there's a lot of traction that goes on between those two parts of yourself. I say that autism, how I describe it to my patients and people that I treat, or not treat, that people that I see, assess, and help them to manage themselves, is that autism is the fear of not knowing the unknown. So I tell them that if you put a autism person, in the same environment for the rest of their life, where everything remains similar, you will never know that the person is autistic. If they know the outcomes of everything that is happening around them, they will be absolutely fine. Whereas all of a sudden, if you start them through transitions, their autism becomes more obvious. All of a sudden, the loss of structure, the change, the environment, the kind of understanding the system, the preparation towards it, all of a sudden that becomes obvious. And then I describe ADHD as a constant need for stimulation, because the norepinephrine and dopamine are dysregulated. For example, in inattentive type of ADHD, it is lower as compared to the plateau. In hyperactive, impulsive type of ADHD, the dopamine goes high, like the dopamine and norepinephrine levels are high. Hence, there's a constant strive to be able to do something and get into trouble in impulsive, and still they're unable to get rid of their energy. And then there's the combined type, in which it goes through peaks and troughs. So when you need it, it's not there. When you don't need it, all of a sudden, norepinephrine, dopamine is available. For example, 9 o'clock at night, all of a sudden you're there. Then you have got a task, an assignment for your master's, let's say, and you have been given 3 weeks, and all of a sudden your brain comes alive 2 to 3 days earlier, and you do 12 hours each day or 18 hours each day, finishing it 10 times in a very zigzag manner. So the ADHD, so this is how I describe it to people that I manage, that I see for autism and ADHD assessments. And when you intertwine it, I have this quote. I said, autism is like a parent to ADHD. It does not let it be too disorganized or anarchic. And ADHD is like a friend to autism. It does not let it be too recluse. And hence, the presentation of autism, the intertwining AuDHD is such that even in the neurodevelopmental world, the neurodivergent world, they're very much alienated by autistic and ADHDers, because autistics will say, no, you do not belong to us, you're not autistic. And the ADHDers will say, no, you're too organized to be ADHDers. So the pure autism and pure ADHD, they also alienate AuDHDs a lot.
Totally. Yeah. I struggle to relate to one or the other for sure. And that's one of the reasons I initially didn't even think I had either, because both of them hit each other. And I was like, no, I'm too this for that, but I'm too this for that. And then you kind of discount it. But then inside, my brain's just constantly fighting with itself. And that's why it can be so isolating, you know?
No, absolutely. I remember seeing a patient when I was doing these joint assessments, and it was not a joint assessment; it was ADHD assessment. So the amazing lady was in her 50s, and she had an amazing sense of humor. And she was talking to me and said, you know, doctor, I've put off this assessment for about 30 years, because I could not understand how can I be so organized for ADHD. But then I thought I might be autistic, and said, I'm too disorganized for autistic. And I've been to at least 10 or 11 psychiatrists, and they're not able to give me answers for any of those. And while she was saying it, she noticed a smirk. I said, "Why are you smirking, doctor?" I said, "Well, I might be the 13th doctor that you've gotten lucky with because I think I might be able to answer the question." I said, "Yeah, that would be amazing." So in the end, when I started explaining to her, she burst into tears. And she said, "This is exactly because one part of it could not explain me. And there was another part that was unexplained by one condition. But now that you're telling me that you can have both, and it absolutely makes sense. You're a genius. You're a genius." And I said, "No, I'm not a genius. I'm somebody who understands autism and ADHD very well and intertwining nature of it." And again, whatever I've learned, because if you look at the literature, it's very scant. Like there's hardly anything out there about AuDHD. Um, uh, there's in the past 3 years, there's still studies coming up about the co-occurring autism and ADHD. But even in the textbooks, the presentations are not given. Like the symptoms are given out of context. So I rely completely on my patients. And I said, my patients are my textbooks, and this is where I learn the most from, because what I can learn from their life stories and the struggles that they have. That gives me another skill set to deal with another person who might be struggling with the same situation, which is nowhere in textbooks. And probably it will take 15, 20 years for the textbooks to come to terms with those kind of presentation to be able to teach people properly if they're just relying on textbooks.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Totally, couldn't agree more. What insight do you have on the predisposing factors for being neurodivergent? Like, have you done research on it? Like, what kind of things? What causes it? Kind of, I guess.
Like it is genetic. It is definitely genetic,
Yeah.
and there are some developmental factors during pregnancy in utero where if something interferes with the brain development, it can lead to autism and ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But saying that, like again, when you look at the genetics, like where does it all come from? If you look at the evolutionary basis of it, and that's what I say, that these conditions are evolutionary.
Yeah.
These autism and ADHD existed as long as the humankind has existed, and it has helped us to survive. It has helped us to think beyond the obvious, to be able to evolve that we have from being caveman to hunters to agriculture societies to industrial revolution to kind of creating cities and everything, and then entering a media age, and then a social media age, and then an AI age. It's not possible without somebody thinking beyond the obvious. And there is a hypothesis which I talk about very fondly about, and it's called the gene environment hypothesis, gene environment mismatch. And it is that genes existed, for example, if you go back 20 BC, 30 BC, but it was a norm. Autism and ADHD was a norm. It was part of your personality and part of who you are. It still is, but we don't see it as often because with time, as the environment changed, the genes mutated in order to accommodate for the changes that is happening. But somehow those environmental changes happened more more quickly than the genes could mutate and adapt to that change. Hence, we see that in certain families, in certain terrains. I come from Pakistan, so we have a lot of intermarriages that happens. We have a lot of cousin marriages that happen. And we see that as a result of that, the pool does not get diversified. And if the neurodevelopmental conditions are caught in it, so they keep on replicating. And I see that nowadays in the offspring and my nephews and nieces and everybody around me, I see at least in my family, 30 to 40% of the people are neurodivergent. It's because the gene pool has not expanded. Whereas in the world, the gene pool has expanded, the family marriages have not been there. And hence, I see when I go back to my part of the world, I see at least 20 to 30% people who have got ADHD. Whereas where I come here, it's down to 3% to 4% to 5%. It is because of the gene pool and plus the terrain and the stimulation, the need for stimulation, because back home, we multitask on so many things. We need that kind of stimulation to be able to stay on top of things. And that's a normality. That is like normality is very relative term, but there, ADHD in certain areas is a normality. And if you're not, then that's kind of you're seen as different.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole thing about gene and environment is that we have to accept this as an evolutionary condition. It has evolved, but still it has stuck around in certain families because of the geographical reason or because of not having mutated because of one reason or the other. But you see that a lot in African countries, in Southeast Asian countries, in Far East Asian countries, where there has not been a lot of research done because it does not appear at an early age because of the social structures that they have created for them, for us, for the children, because everybody is involved in the care of a child, whether it be uncle, aunts, whether it be the caretakers, whether it be the cousins. So somehow the things that they're not good at, it gets covered. And in those communities, there's a lot of thing about late diagnosis. I'm currently doing a dissertation because I'm doing a master's in MSc in neurodevelopmental sciences from King's. So my systematic review is about how culture kind of interferes, leading to late diagnosis of autism and ADHD.
That's fascinating. I can't wait to read that because I think there's so many different cultures and genders and all that get missed. Are there any like cultural and systematic biases that you have noticed and who gets diagnosed with AuDHD and neurodivergence and who gets missed and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, like it's most of the research is about white male. Most of the diagnostic criteria are based on that research. So definitely there is massive bias. When people talk about autism, ADHD in male and female, diagnostically there is no difference. But the difference is about how different they are as a gender. For example, the female hormones, again, as compared to male hormones, like again in around the menstrual cycle, as the hormone levels dip, the female hormone dip, so does the dopamine. And people who have got ADHD, females have got ADHD, that worsen during that time. But again, along with that, there's a social responsibility. We don't talk about that social responsibility. We talk about the disparity between male and female, but actually the society has created those kind of models for males and female. When you're a female, you're expected to mask, you're expected to conform, you're expected to kind of act in a certain way. You have to be polite. If a female in a leadership role becomes more assertive, they can be considered rude, whereas male will be considered assertive or be considered male because this is who they are, this is how they are. So this societal pressure has created the disparity, and we hardly talk about it. When it comes to the diagnostic bit, it gets masked because of the societal pressure. If you take away the societal pressure, if you let them unmask, you create an environment, you will see they're very similar. The presentations are very similar, except for the body, the physiological changes, like the female hormones versus the male hormones, the strength of the muscles of a male and a female. So those are the things that are different. But I think one of the most important thing that we forget about is the society that we have created that applies pressure on the female and hence pushes them to mask and mirror because they should not look any different.
Couldn't agree more.
That caused the disparity between male and female diagnosis.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was just sitting here listening so intently and feeling so touched because it's so nice to hear someone talk about this. I don't know. Yeah. We don't talk about it enough, and I'm sitting here just like, oh yes, thank you.
Societal pressures definitely put differences on each gender and even cultures and stuff like that. There's obviously also men that would relate to the sort of, I guess, stereotypical female experience too. Is that right? Because some men do really heavily mask. I know the hormones are different, but I think Yeah, it's not necessarily fully gendered, right? It's more about how society treats those genders.
How society, exactly. And that's what, because initially I thought it's gender. And then when I started to look at the disparity between the presentation not so different apart from the physiology of a male and a female. But then when I started reading more about it, it is a society. It's whether you're in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Pakistan, in India, Sri Lanka, Far East Asia, the societal pressure on female is the same, is very much the same. It has not changed much. So if you create an environment in which people are allowed to unmask, and we females are allowed to unmask, and you will see the presentation being very different, not being very different, but again, you'll see this as a massive change. And this is what we have to create. We have to create places where we can unmask without being judged. And that would be the key thing to kind of helping people unmask, take away the societal pressure and address it and talk about it as much as possible.
Yes, agreed. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Do you also think that like the Western kind of capitalistic rat race world that's developed over the last 100 years also contributes to kind of this like inner masking of everyone who's neurodivergent? Do you think that being neurodivergent has become not harder because we're starting to get more awareness, but do you think the way that the world is working these days where it's just demanding all the time, that's why we're also stressed?
Yeah, but because the thing is, they expect, I think over a period of time, the expectation is to work in a certain way, in a certain order, and the rules they apply is like, you have to work 9 to 5. You have to, you should not overwork. People talk about work-life balance, and I said, it is different for different people. If I like to work and if I enjoy my work, you cannot tell me to stop working at 5 o'clock. I need to create a work-life blend, a work-life harmony, where I just help myself as well as give time to my family as well at the same time. I think this is what is important. So if you apply the same pressure, again, this is a societal pressure. This is a culture. This is not even culture. This is a systematic pressure that has been put on people to create things, to create silos, and they're expected to work on the same way as everybody else. Just like education system does not look at your strength, it does not look at your not so strong areas, and it puts you on a carousel and expects you to do the same. For example, grading you in terms of A's, A stars, B's, C's, whatever the grading system is. And I always tell people, for example, if you go and buy spaghetti, red sauce, pasta, meatballs, you're expecting a spaghetti bolognese, right? But all of a sudden, the expectation is that you have this ingredient, but they expect you to be a chicken biryani. You cannot be a chicken biryani because you don't have the ingredients for that. So everybody's content, everybody's ingredients, everybody's constitution is completely different unless and until we acknowledge that. We acknowledge those constituents differently, those ingredients differently, and kind of help them to navigate in those areas, which will make this world such an amazing place. Because if we play to our strengths, each one of us, it will be such an amazing, friendly, congruent place where it will be a mosaic, but it will look so beautiful. At this moment in time, everybody is trying to ruin that mosaic and giving it a simple, plain color, and which is unacceptable.
Yes. Oh, I love your analogies. Yeah. All these visual analogies. I'm just bloody loving them. And it's good for the old visual brain, eh? I often meet people who have they identify with traits of both autism and ADHD. They may have no diagnosis. They may have only one. Do you think that they're so different yet they're so similar? Firstly, can you kind of describe that? But then do you think that autism and ADHD could even sit on a shared kind of spectrum in a way?
But just manifest differently?
Yeah. Are they the same? Are they different? Because sometimes they feel the same. Sometimes they feel different.
Yeah. The thing is, this is a question that I've asked in this book that I've written. And it is is it a spectrum or is it a separate diagnosis? Now, if you look at when I was researching about the book, I came across the history. I was thinking about what are the other conditions which are very much similar? And then I came across bipolar. I said bipolar definitely, because bipolar itself is nothing unless it is a mix of depression and mania or hypomania. And then depression does not describe bipolar completely, and mania or hypomania on its own does not describe bipolar on its own. It describes parts of it. But if you combine the depression, mania, and hypomania together, that describe bipolar very effectively. And I think that should be the case with AuDHD as well, as we go, as we dig into more research, because what we have noticed is definitely there are genetic links, there are DNA links, there are the same areas of the brain that are implicated, very similar functioning. And you never know, this might become a separate diagnosis in DSM-7 or 8 or 9 or ICD-15 or 16 at some point. But a lot of research needs to be looked into. But whilst we are making this journey, I think it is important to understand, because when people come to me and they say, I don't know whether it's autism or ADHD. Not so much when lay people, but when the professionals come to me, or doctors or psychiatrists, and they say, I'm unable to differentiate. I said, how can you not differentiate between autism and ADHD? They are miles apart from each other. I said, but there are certain things that they're very, very similar. I said, okay. So I sat with one and I said, so you look at inattention, it's the same. I said, inattention, if you divide attention into several parts, you will see that there's a focus on a certain aspect that does not allow distractibility, and then when you're focusing on a bigger part, and then there is a shift of attention span between different tasks. In ADHD, that is very much an issue, that you're unable to keep your attention on task. Whereas when it comes to autism, the attention is massive. For example, if they like something, if they're interested in something, you cannot move them away from it. So it's not the attention. What you're referring to is basically indifference. If a person with autism does not want to do anything and you make them do it, they'll make a mess out of it, and you'll start thinking that probably they are not concentrating and they're not registering the information. No, they're not interested. So inattention and indifference is one. Then there's distractibility and sensory overload. So sensory overload is about the perception. It's about the senses. And for example, if somebody is having loud noises and loud sounds, and they put their hands on their ears, they are feeling the physical pain of it. They cannot bear it. And again, the perceptions, their nerve endings are so sensitive, they're able to pick up things. I remember somebody who had, I think it was a 15-year-old teenager. And he told me, he said, doctor, see, I can predict weather based on the humidity. I can smell the air and can tell you that it's going to be storm. I said, how often are you correct? I said, 99.9%.
Wow.
And I was thinking, if the child had said this 20 years ago, they would have locked him up saying that it's a psychotic disorder. Whereas now it is making sense, because it's the amount of moisture and it's the sensitivity of the nerve ending in his nose that are connected to his brain that is exactly telling him what it is. They're able to smell things. For example, if they're having pizza, or somebody brings them a pizza and they don't know where the pizza is from, they'll be able to tell the ingredients of the pizza. They'll be able to tell where they have got the pizza from, and it doesn't taste the same. The same is the case with sounds. People are able to pick up things that nobody else can hear. That's a beeping of certain equipments, buzzing of electricity through the walls, even animals' noises. They can hear it from a distance. They can hear the engine roars from a mile or two away. Because somebody, I was talking to somebody and said, I told my father, I said, there's a truck this make is going to come in about 5 minutes' time. My father did not believe in that. And in 5 minutes' time, Same truck came in. And this happened quite a few times. And the father was impressed. I said, how can I sit? Because I'm able to hear that.
Mm.
So you have to differentiate the sensory overload from the distractibility. The distractibility is when the person goes in, because they're not able to keep attention on task. Plus, at the same time, the norepinephrine dopamine levels are not enough. They need to create stimulation for themselves. So all of a sudden, something new comes in, their attention span will attract, that will generate more norepinephrine dopamine till it goes away, until there's another thing comes in. And they're very curious about it. Whereas in sensory overload, it is painful, it is stressful. It will cause them to go into their own silos and not interact with people. And then there's no filter versus factual discourse. For example, people with ADHD, they can say things inappropriately, a joke or something. They will not gauge the crowd. They won't read the room. Whereas the same is said about autism. And I said, no, in autism, it's a factual discourse. If you go to them, if you ask them, how do I look in this new black t-shirt? And they'll look at you and say, you look horrible. Whereas, again, it's a societal pressure. Society tells us that when you go to a person, and you ask them what you're wearing, you should get an affirmative or a positive response from a person. Autistic person will never tell you that. They will say it as they see it. There's so many other examples. For example, I remember a mother telling me that he kind of embarrasses us. For example, saw somebody who was disabled. They were an amputee, and all of a sudden the child said, "Oh, but where is the arm? I want to understand that. Where's the arm gone? Why I've got an arm and why they do not have an arm?" So that was a factual discourse. They see it as a saying it and they are curious about it. Whereas in ADHD, it can be something very inappropriate. It can be something which is out of order. And then they are remorseful about it. Whereas we go to the autistic person and say, no, that's the truth, isn't it? So why should I say sorry for it? So this is what you have to understand, that the filters are not there, but again, the reason behind it is completely different. And then when people say about autism that it's hyperfocus, no, in autism there's no hyperfocus. The hyperfocus is ability to go into a bubble, and the bubble is created because you are struggling with something. It can be an assignment, it can be a project of yours, or it is something that you have to do, and there's an incentive around it. And you have procrastinated long enough that the deadline is coming, you have to have it finished. And the thing about bubble is the moment you pierce it, the tension is gone, and it's so much difficult to get back to that point.
Yes.
So that's why if you're in hyperfocus and somebody somebody taps you on the shoulder and asks you about something, all of a sudden it's gone. Because it is creating that dopamine and norepinephrine. All of a sudden it is gone. Whereas in autism, it's preoccupation, it's their interest. They would happily, they would be excited about it. There's a natural excitement, there's a natural happiness, the natural satisfaction of doing something. For example, if they have a collection of something, they'll spend 8 hours doing that. If they're into something and if they're watching documentaries, they will happily watch 8 hours, 7 hours, but there's no pressure. If they have to move away from it, they will move away and they'll come back to it and enjoy it the very same way. So this is the difference between hyperfocus and preoccupation on autism and ADHD. And hence, when we see it, we are unable to differentiate it because we do not question it. And we kind of put it under the same umbrella. Same is the case with over-talkativeness and talking passionately. People with ADHD are over-talkative, and they can talk about anything and everything under the sun. They will interrupt others. They will say their own things. Whereas in autism, you will only see them talking passionately if it is about a subject of their interest.
Yeah.
I'll be sitting very quietly, and all of a sudden they start talking about cricket, or they started talking about let's say autism and ADHD, and then the policies around it and things like that. I'll be the loudest voice. I'll be the most passionate voice in the room. But apart from that, if they start talking about something else, I'll be the quietest person in the room because I won't be interested in the conversation they were having. Whereas for ADHD, they will talk about anything and everything, and that stimulates them because there's a need for stimulation.
I relate to that so hard. That's so me, Ali.
Yeah.
Like I'll not say a bloody word for hours, and then all of a sudden someone will bring up something, and I'm like, and I'm the most intense.
She comes alive.
I'm like, oh.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what you're saying basically is, on the outside, it can appear that ADHD and autism look really similar, but really it's the why in the brain as to why it's happening that's the main difference. And that's what clinicians and people need to actually dig deeper for, is why are they doing that, not what the trait actually is. It's kind of what you're saying, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the other part of it is, which is the differentiating factors, is that for example, in an AuDHD, they will be organized and disorganized. They love to organize themselves, but they cannot organize themselves. At the same time, they hate being messy. They hate being disorganized, but their ADHD brain is not letting them do that. But the same is the case with silence versus noise. For example, they like the noise, they get deflated by the noise. They need hours and days and weeks to recover from a social situation. So again, the same is the case with planning and spontaneity. For example, autism brain likes to plan things ahead of time. They want to plan the holidays. They want to know where you're going, where you're staying, where the bathrooms are, where the parking is, everything. They will have the itinerary. Whereas at the same time, the ADHD brain will kick in, and all of a sudden there will be something out of the itinerary that they would like to do, and that would put the autism kind of on a brink of a disaster, because they won't bear it. But at the same time, they need stimulation. So the ADHD has to stimulate themselves somehow, some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are the things that you have to keep an eye on, that these are the differences. But again, when happening in the same body, you're having the best of both the worlds and the worst of both the worlds at the same time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In terms of autism, there's obviously a large spectrum. Do you know much research, or have you done any research on the differences between things like profound autism, but then autism levels 1, 2, and 3? Like, they just seems like such a large spectrum. Do you have any justification or research around that?
Like when you say profound autism, a lot of the time it is accompanied by intellectual disability.
Gotcha.
So when there's intellectual disability, there has to be a support structure. Like in the UK, if it is borderline or mild intellectual disability, it is dealt with by the general adult, and we see them as part of the general adult population. But if it is moderate to severe to profound, in which there's structural brain changes, there are some rare disorders, rare syndromes which cause them to have autism and ADHD. It is because of the structural changes that happens. That's where it is profound and severe. Whereas when it comes to level 1, level 2, and level 3, I believe that it's very fluid. Like again, you have to look at the fluidity. Like sometimes, if you get used to a workplace or an environment, and you're living at one place, you're working at one place, you're doing things at one place, everything is going in the right order, you would not need any support. Probably you're level 0 at that moment, and things change. For example, your relationship break, or there is the job that you love, all of a sudden it's not there, and there is disruption that is taking place. Probably at that point, you need some kind of support, either in work or home. So it depends on that severity and how you're reacting to it, how it is impacting. So it's a very fluctuant level. It can be a level 3 in office, and you can be a level 1 at home, or you can be a level 0 at home. So when they say about the level, because for me it is very rigid. But at the same time, I do understand that people with autism, they need to have those very rigid definitions. But when it comes to AuDHD, and when it comes to seeing things in reality, it keeps on changing. It's a very fluid way of looking at it. The support changes because of the circumstances. And I always say that you have to look autism and ADHD in the right context. If you're not reading the context, if you're not reading the story, if you're not reading the situation and things that led to it, you will miss a great deal.
Yeah. Amen. Wow. I know you're sitting there going, I want another hour of that. Well, not yet. That will be coming next week, in a week from now. But what an amazing chat. Thanks again to Dr. Khurram Sadiq for giving us so much of his time and giving us so much insight. Yeah. We'll be back next week for more stuff, including stuff about what it does in families, the sibling connection, common misdiagnoses, the unique traits of AuDHD. Is there a relationship between OCD? We talk about how companies can start accommodating differences, and we talk about how we can manage AuDHD burnout. And we answer a couple of questions that people submitted in our Reddit community as well. So WTF is AuDHD podcast. Go to our link tree and you can join our Reddit. And
don't forget, we've got the giveaway for a signed copy of Dr. Khurram Sadiq's book, Explaining AuDHD. So tag your friends on IG, let them know about this podcast, and you're in the draw to win that.
Bloody beauty. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another amazing episode with Dr. Khurram Sadiq.
Woo.
Bye.